Okay, because of this channel and because I shoot on Sigma lenses, I shoot on Sigma and Canon. When I can afford a new lens, I like to try out different brands. And I've enjoyed Sigma for video. Primarily that's what I use them for. And I think because of the video I did showing the Sigma 30mm 1.4, it drew some attention. Sigma noticed me and they got in touch and they said, hey, would you like to try out some of our other lenses? Yes, of course I would. First up, the first of its kind, the first zoom lens with an aperture of 1.8. Now typically you only see a zoom lens has an aperture down to 2.8. And as you know, the bigger your aperture opens, the more light, the more natural light you can let into your camera, as well as it can create that blurry background. So the bigger aperture you can afford, the better, especially with video, because you're going to be able to go into lower light situations and get cleaner light into the camera without having to bump up your ISO. Now, I'm not really a big pixel peeper, meaning that I'm not going to take a lot of still photos and zoom in and check on the little tiny minute details of a lens. Photography for me is a hobby. As you know, I do mainly video. And the best thing for me and what I like to do with this channel is always to shoot video with the lens or the camera or whatever the piece of gear is, and then just watch the video, right? It's the proof is in the pudding type thing, how it's used on a daily basis, how I'm using it here, how I'd use it out in the field, you name it. I just want to shoot video through it and see how it looks. That's going to be my best gauge for whether I like the product or not. So that's what I'm going to do here. I rolled some footage a couple days ago in a museum, which typically museums are not lit very well. This was a train museum, so it was very wide open, big spaces, and it had lighting, but lighting was really high in the ceiling. And again, it was typical museum type lighting. So very low light. Without the 1.8 aperture, I'm really not going to be able to get the shots that I did. But the best thing to do is to show you, and then you can just see how the lens did in low light. So before I jump into that video and the footage that I took, let me talk a little bit about the lens and the features that I like about it for video. First off, the build quality it's hefty, right? It feels great, feels professional. Sigma seems to have stepped it up with they're calling this the art line. It's all black, looks great on your camera. It is pretty long for a 18 to 35 millimeter. So, you know, unlike a prime lens like my Sigma 1.4 that I have on now, you can go out and be fairly compact. This is quite a bit longer. When you put the lens hood on, it's even longer than that. And this lens hood here snaps on really nice. It doesn't really wiggle, it stays on. I've had other lens hoods. I think even my first Sigma lens was kind of loose and it would easily pop off. So this one is solid. I really like that. The focus ring is nice and smooth and not too tight, but tight enough not to move around while you're shooting and get yourself out of focus. And it has a nice long throw, which is the distance in between the start and the stop, so that you can get that critical focus and turn nice and slow and be able to pull a nice focus. The autofocus, manual focus, really you can leave an autofocus all the time. If you use the AF quick, the autofocus quick function on your camera, when you're shooting, you can grab a quick focus by pressing the shutter halfway down, and the autofocus works good for that. Of course, you've got to change the focus when your focus point changes. The 70D has automatic continuous autofocus, but the 60D does not. Most Canon crop sensors, a lot of DSLRs don't have that functionality built in quite yet, but it's coming. And so you can leave an autofocus mode, and if you have to grab a quick manual focus, you can easily just turn the ring. Some lenses, when they're in autofocus, the manual override is locked. This one is not. So you can just go ahead and grab manual focus or autofocus, either one you need, while it's in autofocus mode. And then of course it's fairly sharp lens. I did take some photos with this, as you can see here, and the photos turned out great. And of course, this is a 1.8 aperture, okay? So that's the key. You have some zoom range, you have a wide end at 18 millimeters, which gives you nice being able to capture the whole scene in a shot. And then you can zoom in a little bit to 35 millimeters, which is really great to have that If you can't be as close as you want, you can have a little bit of a zoom. So you get a little bit more flexibility in your compositions, and you get 1.8. So you can really take this lens into anywhere and be able to get great light into your camera without cranking your ISO. And then of course, price. This is a sub $1,000 lens right now at the time of this filming. I believe it's even under $800. So that's actually a great price for a product like this. A zoom lens with an aperture 1.8. It's very cool. So you could kind of start with this lens and really work with this lens for years. I mean, you probably wouldn't have to get another lens, okay? So again, I'm really big on buying the biggest aperture possible for your first lens, because that's going to really release your camera, right? It's going to be able to make it so it can get that shallow depth of field, the blurry background. It's going to be able to get low light footage. So that's the key when you're buying, I think, a first lens, or really any lens. If you can buy a big aperture, you're going to be much happier with the results you get. And if there are any cons, it's a little long, so you have quite a big piece of kit on you, big camera, body, and lens when you're carrying it around, and it's heavy. So not the ideal thing for going around doing run and gun and not being noticed, but those are really minor things when it comes to this lens. Most of the time we're getting this lens, we're gonna lock it down on a tripod and we're gonna shoot, okay? So let's do that now. Let's take a look at the stuff I shot in low light, and you can really just, you can see the lens and how it works, and that's gonna be the best gauge of its performance.